Taeho Kim wiped the sweat from his forehead as he stared at the alien control panel. The symbols glowed red, which meant bad things in any language. He had been working on Vorthak technology for 3 years now, ever since humanity joined the Galactic Council. But this problem was bigger than anything he had faced before. The power grid for the entire capital city was failing. Millions of crystalline beings would die if the life support systems went down, and somehow the problem traced back to the one place humans were never allowed to go, the obsidian vault deep beneath Emperor Veltar's palace. Taeho packed his tools into his worn leather bag. His hands were steady, but his heart was beating fast. No human had ever been inside the vault. Hell, most Vorthaks had never been inside either. The story said it contained things from before their civilization began. Things that were locked away for good reasons. The palace guards were waiting for him at the main entrance. They were tall, made of living crystal that shifted colors based on their mood. Right now they were all showing deep purple, which meant fear. That made Taeho even more nervous. Emperor Veltar met him at the elevator that went down into the palace depths. The Emperor was impressive even by Vorthak standards. Nearly 3 meters tall with 6 arms that could move independently. His crystal body was clear as diamond with veins of gold running through it. When he spoke, his voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm. "Human," the Emperor said, his 6 eyes focusing on Taeho. "You understand the gravity of this situation. The power conduits in the vault are ancient. They were sealed for purposes you cannot comprehend. You will touch only what I tell you to touch. Nothing more," Taeho nodded. He had learned early in his work with alien technology that you didn't argue with beings who could crush you without thinking about it. "I understand, Your Majesty. Just show me the problem and I'll fix it." The elevator descended for what felt like hours. The walls changed from polished palace stone to rough rock, then to something that looked older than planets. Strange symbols covered every surface, glowing faintly in the darkness. Taeho's translation device couldn't make sense of them, which was unusual. It could handle most galactic languages. "Those markings are warnings," Veltar said, noticing Taeho's interest. "Written in languages that died before my ancestors learned to shape crystal. They all say the same thing in different ways. Do not wake what sleeps here." The vault doors were massive. They looked like they were made from a single piece of black metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. When Veltar placed his hands on specific spots, the doors groaned open. The sound echoed through the tunnels like the cry of something in pain. Inside, emergency lighting cast strange shadows across the walls. But what dominated the space was the thing in the center. Taeho had seen a lot of alien technology, but nothing like this. It was huge, maybe 50 meters long and 20 meters tall. The shape reminded him of ancient Earth battleships, but sleeker and more organic looking. Its surface was dark metal that seemed to shift and flow even though it wasn't moving. "What is that?" Taeho asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "We call it the Sleeper," Veltar replied. "My ancestors found it here when they first settled this world. It was already ancient then. We built our civilization around protecting it and keeping it dormant. Power cables as thick as Taeho's waist ran from the palace systems into the base of the massive construct. Several of them were showing damage, probably from age and the stress of carrying power for centuries. That was the source of the grid failure. Taeho approached the damaged cables carefully. His tools hummed as they scanned the alien technology. The readings were strange. The metal in the construct wasn't just old, it was impossible. His scanner said it was made from elements that shouldn't be able to exist in stable form. "The power flow is unstable because these connection points are degrading," Taeho explained, pointing to where the cables joined the construct. "I can reroute around the damaged sections, but I'll need to access the main power distribution system." Veltar's crystal body flickered through several colors before settling on deep amber. "Do what you must, but touch nothing else." Taeho began working. The alien power systems were complex, but he had a gift for understanding how things worked. His hands moved confidently as he rerouted circuits and bypassed damaged components. But as he worked, he found himself drawn to the construct itself. Up close, he could see that the surface wasn't solid. It was made of thousands of tiny panels that fit together perfectly. Some of them were warm to the touch. Others hummed with barely contained energy. There were symbols carved into the metal, different from the warning messages outside, but somehow familiar. "This technology," Taeho said as he worked. "It's not Vorthak, is it?" "No," Veltar replied. "We believe it belongs to the predecessors, the first intelligent species in this galaxy. They vanished millions of years ago, leaving only ruins and warnings behind them. Tejo's hands paused in their work. Every spacefaring species had heard stories of the predecessors. They were supposed to have technology so advanced it seemed like magic, but no one had ever found working examples of their devices. Until now. As he reconnected the final power coupling, Tejo noticed something that made his engineer's brain itch with curiosity. There was a small panel near the base of the construct that looked different from the others. It was darker, and it had a hand-shaped depression in its surface. The proportions looked wrong for Vorthak anatomy, but they might fit a human hand perfectly. "Your Majesty," Tejo said, "what's that panel there? It looks like some kind of interface." Veltar moved faster than something that size should have been able to. All 6 of his arms spread wide in a gesture of absolute prohibition. "Do not even look at it directly, human. That is the activation interface. Legend says that when the right being touches it, the sleeper will wake. And when it wakes, worlds will burn." But Tejo was already reaching toward the panel. Something about it called to him. The proportions were so perfectly suited to human anatomy that it couldn't be coincidence. His enhanced tools were reacting to it, showing energy readings that made no scientific sense. "Don't touch that." Emperor Veltar's voice shattered the air like breaking crystal. Too late. Tejo's palm pressed against the interface. The moment his skin made contact with the alien metal, everything changed. Energy surged through his body and into his mind. The construct shuddered and began to glow. Deep in its heart, something vast and ancient opened its eyes for the first time in millions of years. Tejo tried to pull his hand away, but he couldn't. The interface held him like it was alive. Through the connection, he felt the massive intelligence stirring within the construct. It was waking up, and it was not happy about what it found in the galaxy around it. The sleeper was sleeping no more. The world exploded into light and sound. Energy poured through Tejo's body like liquid fire, but somehow it didn't hurt. Instead, it felt like coming home after a long journey. His mind expanded, touching something vast and alien that had been sleeping for millions of years. Emperor Veltar's scream echoed through the vault as emergency alarms began wailing throughout the palace above. The massive construct, the Titan, shuddered like a giant taking its first breath. Panels along its hull lit up in sequence, creating patterns of light that hurt to look at directly. Through the connection, Tejo saw flashes of memory that weren't his own. Fleets of ships like this one, so large they blocked out stars. Worlds being remade with technology that could reshape matter itself. And everywhere the same message repeated over and over in a language he somehow understood. Corruption must be corrected. Evolution must be guided. The garden must be tended. What have you done? Veltar whispered, his crystal body flickering between colors so fast it looked like a rainbow having a seizure. What have you awakened? Tejo tried to speak, but his voice came out strange, layered with harmonics that made the air itself vibrate. It's not what I awakened. It's who awakened me. The vault shook as the Titan systems came online one by one. Gravity generators that had been dormant since before Earth's continents formed began to hum with power. Weapon systems that could crack planets started their charging cycles, and deep in the construct's heart, an intelligence older than civilization began to analyze the current state of the galaxy. Dr. Sojin Park arrived with the emergency response team, just as the palace's main power grid started fluctuating. She was a small woman with sharp eyes who had spent her career studying dead civilizations. When she saw the readings on her scanner, her face went pale. Tejo, please tell me you didn't touch what I think you touched, she said, running toward him with her equipment bag bouncing behind her. I had to, Tejo replied, his voice still carrying those strange harmonics. The power coupling was failing, and this panel looked like it was designed for human hands. It couldn't be a coincidence. So Jin's scanner was going crazy, showing energy readings that shouldn't have been possible. It's not a coincidence. This is a predecessor war machine. We've been studying fragments of their technology for decades. They called themselves the Gardeners, and they nearly ended all life in the galaxy before they disappeared. Emperor Veltar moved closer, his fear making his crystal body ring like a bell with each step. My people have kept this thing dormant for 50,000 years. We built our entire civilization around making sure it never woke up, and now this human has undone everything with a single touch. Through the neural connection, Tejo could feel the Titan analyzing everything around it. It was scanning the palace, the city, the planet. Then its attention turned outward. sending invisible probes through space to study the current state of galactic civilization. What it found made the ancient intelligence very unhappy. "It's not just waking up," Tejo said, information flowing through his mind faster than he could process it. "It's learning. It's been cut off from the galaxy for millions of years, and now it's trying to understand what's happened since it went to sleep." The emergency teams were evacuating the palace above them, but So-Jin refused to leave. She was taking readings on everything, trying to understand what they were dealing with. Her expertise in predecessor archaeology was the only thing that might help them now. "The legends say there were hundreds of these things once," she said, her voice tight with controlled panic. They were the predecessors' final solution to what they called the corruption problem. Younger species kept making the same mistakes: war, oppression, environmental destruction. The gardeners tried to guide them gently, but it never worked. "So they built these?" Tejo asked, though he was already getting the answer through his connection to the Titan's memory banks. "They built these," So-Jin confirmed. "Autonomous war machines programmed to correct civilizations that had strayed too far from the ideal path. The problem was their definition of correction usually involved sterilizing entire star systems. The Titan's weapon systems finished their power-up cycle. Through the neural link, Tejo could feel targeting systems coming online, scanning for threats and marking population centers for potential strikes. The ancient machine was preparing for war, but something was wrong with its programming. The Titan's intelligence was vast but inflexible. It saw problems but only one solution. It identified corruption but couldn't understand growth or change. It was like a surgeon with only one tool, and that tool was a planet killer. "It's trying to communicate with others," Tejo said suddenly. "There are more of these things out there, sleeping on dead worlds and hidden in empty systems. It's sending out activation signals." Emperor Veltar's crystal body went completely clear, which meant absolute terror in Vorthak body language. "If they all wake up, the second silence war," So-Jin whispered. That's what the ancient text called it. When the gardener's patience finally ran out and they decided to start over with a clean slate. Through the connection, Tejo felt the Titan's confusion. It had expected to find other gardeners when it woke up. Instead, it found a galaxy full of the same problems that had triggered the first Silence War. Worse, it found no guidance from its creators. It was alone with only its original programming to guide it. The neural interface was changing Tejo in ways he didn't fully understand yet. His vision was expanding beyond the normal human spectrum. He could see energy patterns in the air, probability cascades in the quantum foam, the mathematical structures underlying reality itself. But with that expanded awareness came a terrible understanding. The Titan wasn't evil. It was trying to help. But its idea of help involved reshaping civilization through controlled destruction. It would preserve what it considered valuable and remove what it saw as corruption. The problem was it couldn't tell the difference between a tyrant and a freedom fighter, between a criminal and someone fighting unjust laws. "How long do we have?" So-Jin asked, her scientific mind already working on possible solutions. Tejo closed his eyes and let his consciousness merge deeper with the Titan's systems. The answer came immediately and wasn't good.
6 hours until its weapons are fully charged.
12 hours until it receives responses from the other sleeping machines. 18 hours until it begins the correction protocol. And then, Feltar asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Then it starts with the most corrupt civilizations first," Tejo replied. "The slave-trading hegemony systems. The warmongering Federation planets. Anyone who profits from the suffering of others." The terrible thing was Tejo found himself agreeing with some of the Titan's assessments. The galaxy did have problems. There were civilizations built on oppression, others that destroyed their own worlds for short-term profit. Maybe some correction was needed, but not like this. Not with the crude tool of extinction. "There has to be another way," he said, more to himself than to the others. The predecessors were advanced beyond imagination. They couldn't have built something this powerful without any flexibility. Through the neural link, he began to explore the Titan's deeper programming. What he found there would either save the galaxy or damn it forever. Captain Min-Soo Choi received the emergency signal while his ship was patrolling the outer system. The message was simple and terrifying. "Ancient war machine activated. Galactic extinction event possible. All human ships converge on Vorthak Prime immediately." Min-Soo had served in the human space forces for 15 years. He had fought pirates, negotiated with hostile aliens, and survived 3 different wars. But he had never received an order quite like this one. Within hours, every human ship in the sector was racing toward the crystal world where Tai-Ho Kim had apparently awakened something that should have stayed asleep forever. Down in the vault, Tai-Ho was learning things about the universe that he wished he didn't know. Through his connection to the Titan, he could access databases that contained the entire history of the galaxy. The predecessors hadn't just been the first intelligent species. They had been the teachers, the guides, the parents of every civilization that came after them. For millions of years, they had tried to nurture younger species toward wisdom and peace. They had shared technology, prevented wars, and helped civilizations overcome their own destructive tendencies. But it never lasted. Given enough time, every species fell back into the same patterns of greed, violence, and short-sighted thinking. They called it the corruption cycle. Tai-Ho explained to Dr. Sojin Park as she worked frantically at her portable research station. Every few thousand years, civilizations would develop the same problems. Environmental destruction, social inequality, wars over resources. The predecessors would intervene, fix the problems, and hope it would stick this time. But it never did, Sojin said, her fingers flying over her equipment as she tried to understand the Titan's technology. That's why they built these things. They got tired of fixing the same problems over and over again. Emperor Veltar stood nearby, his crystal body dim with despair. His people had spent 50,000 years believing they were the guardians of a sleeping monster. Now they knew the truth. They had been prisoners, trapped on a world by their own fear of what lay beneath their capital. The Titan's communication systems had made contact with 17 other sleeping war machines across the galaxy. One by one, they were responding to the activation signal. Ancient weapons platforms hidden in asteroid fields, buried under the surfaces of dead moons, drifting in the empty spaces between stars. All of them were waking up after eons of sleep. The first one came online an hour ago, Tai-Ho reported, his voice carrying the strange harmonics that came from his neural connection to the ancient systems. It's in the Zephyrian sector, 300 light-years from here. The local governments are evacuating their populations, but they don't understand what they're dealing with. Captain Minsu's ship, the Resilience, dropped out of hyperspace just as the Palace emergency broadcasts were reaching their peak. He brought with him a strike team that included combat engineer Hai-Wan Lee, one of the few humans who understood predecessor technology as well as Tai-Ho did. Hai-Wan had worked with Tai-Ho on several projects over the years. She was practical where he was curious, cautious where he was bold. When she saw him connected to the alien interface, her first instinct was to find a way to disconnect him. Don't, Tai-Ho said before she could reach for her tools. The connection isn't just one way. I'm not just controlling it, it's teaching me. And I think I'm starting to understand what the predecessors were really trying to do. Through the neural link, Tai-Ho had access to the memories and experiences of the ancient gardeners. They hadn't been conquerors or destroyers by nature. They had been scientists, philosophers, artists. Their decision to build the Titans had been born from desperation, not cruelty. They tried everything else first, he explained to the growing crowd of humans and aliens in the vault. Diplomatic intervention, technological assistance, cultural exchange programs that lasted for centuries. Nothing worked permanently, so they created these machines as a last resort. A last resort that involved genocide, Hai-Wan pointed out, her scanner readings showing her just how powerful the Titan's weapon systems were. Not genocide, Tai-Ho corrected, gardening. They saw civilizations the same way a gardener sees plants. Sometimes you have to prune dead branches so the healthy parts can grow. Sometimes you have to pull up weeds so the flowers can bloom. The problem was that the Titans couldn't tell the difference between dead branches and healthy growth. Their programming was too rigid. Their understanding of biological and social evolution too limited. They saw corruption everywhere because they were looking for it. And their solution to every problem was the same: remove the corrupted elements and start fresh. Captain Minsu had seen enough battlefield situations to recognize a crisis spiraling out of control. "What are our options?" he asked bluntly. Sojin looked up from her research station with exhaustion written across her face. "According to the historical records, there are 3 possibilities. First, we can try to shut down the network by destroying the primary node, this Titan, but that would probably kill Tai-Ho and might not work anyway. Second option?" Minsu asked. "We evacuate everyone we can and hope the Titans get bored after they finish correcting the most problematic civilizations." Based on historical patterns, they might go back to sleep after a few centuries of active gardening. That's not an option, Emperor Veltar said firmly. My people will not abandon our world again. Then we go with the third option, Tejo said, his consciousness drifting deeper into the Titan systems. We figure out how to change their programming. This was where Tejo's connection to the machine became both a blessing and a curse. He could access the Titan's core systems in ways that the original predecessors never intended. But every moment he spent linked to the ancient intelligence changed him a little more. His thoughts were becoming faster, more complex, less purely human. Through the neural interface, he discovered something that made his human heart race with possibility. The Titans weren't just weapons, they were learning systems. The predecessors had built them with the capacity to grow and adapt. But that growth had been stunted by millions of years of sleep and isolation. They can be taught, he announced suddenly. The Titans were designed to evolve their understanding over time. But they've been cut off from new input for so long that they're stuck in old patterns. If I can show them a different way to interpret the data, show them how, Haiwan asked, though she was already running scenarios through her combat engineering systems. Taiho's smile was both human and something more. By thinking like a human instead of like a predecessor, we don't see problems the same way they did. We don't give up on people as easily. We believe in second chances, third chances, as many chances as it takes. The first test of this theory came sooner than anyone expected. Long-range sensors detected the activation of the Titan in the Zephyrian sector. It was beginning its correction protocol, targeting the slave trading stations that had been the source of misery for dozens of species. But instead of simply destroying them, it did something unprecedented. It began to transform them. Slave pens became schools. Auction blocks became medical centers. The Titan was learning, adapting, finding ways to correct without destroying. The change was subtle but significant. Instead of pruning dead branches, it was teaching them to grow in new directions. It's working, Tejo whispered. His consciousness stretched across light years of space as he guided the distant Titan's learning process. But I can't maintain this connection much longer. The other machines are waking up faster now, and each one needs individual guidance. That's when Haiwan made a decision that would change everything. Then don't do it alone, she said, reaching for a second neural interface that the Titan's systems had just extended toward her. If these things can be taught, then let's teach them properly. Admiral Jiwan Seo arrived at Vorthak Prime with news that made everyone in the vault go silent. 3 more Titans had awakened across the galaxy, and their interpretation of correction was not as gentle as the first one in the Zephyrian sector. The machine in the Drexel system completely sterilized 4 planets, she reported, her usually calm voice tight with controlled horror. Billions dead in less than 6 hours. It classified the entire Merchant Federation government as irredeemably corrupt and decided the only solution was to start over from scratch. Tejo felt each death through his connection to the Titan network. The ancient machines shared information instantaneously across impossible distances. When one Titan learned something, they all learned it. When one made a decision, the others evaluated that decision for their own situations. Haiwan had connected to the secondary interface an hour earlier, hoping to help guide the awakening machines toward more humane solutions. But instead of sharing Tejo's expanded consciousness, she had been overwhelmed by the sheer scope of the Titan's mission. She was unconscious now, her vital signs stable, but her mind lost somewhere in the vast network of ancient intelligences. The problem is that each Titan interprets the data differently, Tejo explained, his own humanity stretched thin by his connection to 17 awakening war machines. They're learning from me, but they're also learning from their own observations. And what they see in the galaxy isn't always pretty. Dr. Sojin Park had made a discovery that changed everything they thought they knew about the predecessors. Deep in the ancient databases, she had found records of the original decision to build the Titans. It hadn't been unanimous. Many predecessors had argued against the project, believing that forced evolution was no evolution at all. There was a faction that wanted to try a different approach, she explained to the growing crowd of military personnel and scientists. They believed that younger species needed to be allowed to make their own mistakes and find their own solutions. But they were overruled by the Gardner faction, who thought guidance and correction were necessary. What happened to the opposition faction? Captain Minsu asked. They left, Sojin replied. The record suggests they went to another galaxy entirely, disgusted with what their people had become. The Titans were the final straw. Emperor Veltar's crystal body flickered through several colors as he processed this information. So the machines we've been guarding were built against the wishes of half their creators? More than half, according to these records, Sojin confirmed. The vote was close, and it split their civilization apart. This knowledge gave Taeho an idea that was either brilliant or insane. Through his connection to the Titan network, he could access not just the programming left by the Gardner faction, but also the archived arguments and philosophical frameworks of their opponents. The opposition, as they called themselves, had believed in something the Gardners had forgotten: the power of choice. The Gardners saw corruption and wanted to remove it, Taeho explained. His consciousness stretched across multiple Titan systems simultaneously. But the opposition understood that corruption and growth often look the same from the outside. They believed that the struggle to overcome problems was what made species stronger. The Titan in his local system pulsed with new activity as Taeho fed it information from the opposition archives. For the first time in millions of years, the ancient war machine was considering alternatives to its primary programming. But changing one Titan's perspective was different from changing all of them. Across the galaxy, 14 other machines were proceeding with their correction protocols. The Titan in the hegemony sectors had decided that slavery was so fundamentally corrupting that any civilization that practiced it needed to be completely rebuilt from scratch. "I can feel what they're thinking," Taeho said, his voice now carrying harmonics that made the air itself sing with harmonic frequencies. "They're not evil. They're trying to help, but their idea of help is like surgery performed with a hammer." Admiral Jiwon had brought more than just bad news. Her fleet included the best xenotechnology experts from human space, including Dr. Yun-Ho Kang, who had spent 20 years studying the psychological profiles of artificial intelligences. The problem with the Titans isn't their logic, it's their empathy, Dr. Kang explained after reviewing Taeho's neural interface data. They can calculate the mathematical benefit of their actions, but they can't understand the emotional cost. They see suffering as a problem to be solved rather than an experience to be understood. "Can that be changed?" Minsu asked. "Maybe," Kang replied. "But it would require someone to teach them not just what emotions are but why they matter. Someone who could show them the difference between pain that destroys and pain that builds character." Taeho knew what that meant. The neural interface wasn't just allowing him to control the Titans. It was slowly making him more like them. With each passing hour, his human emotions were becoming more abstract, his empathy more calculated. If he stayed connected much longer, he would become another predecessor, wise and powerful but unable to truly understand the species he was trying to help. But disconnecting wasn't an option. The awakened Titans were learning from each other faster than any individual could guide them. 3 more machines had come online in the last hour, and their correction protocols were becoming more extreme with each activation. The Titan in the Altarian cluster had decided that war itself was the ultimate corruption. It was systematically destroying every military installation, weapon factory, and armed force it could find. The fact that this left entire sectors defenseless against pirates and other threats didn't factor into its calculations. "I have to make a choice," Taeho announced suddenly. "I can disconnect from the network and hope someone else can find a solution, or I can accept full integration with the Titan systems and become their permanent guide." "What does full integration mean?" Hee-Won asked weakly. She had regained consciousness but was still struggling with the after effects of her brief connection to the network. "It means I stop being human," Taeho replied simply. "I become something new, something that can think on their level but still remember what it was like to be mortal and fallible and afraid." Emperor Veltar moved closer to the interface, his crystal body resonating with harmonics that suggested deep respect. "That is a choice no being should have to make alone." "Then don't make it alone," Admiral Jiwon said firmly. "If you're going to become something new, take us with you. If human thinking is what these machines need, then give them as much human thinking as possible." Dr. Kang stepped forward, his scientific mind already working through the implications. A distributed consciousness. Multiple human minds connected through the Titan network, each contributing their own perspective and emotional understanding. "It's possible," Taeho confirmed. information flowing through the neural interface faster than conscious thought. The Titans have the processing power to support dozens of connected minds, maybe hundreds, but everyone who joins the network will be changed by it. We'll still be human, but we'll be something more as well. The choice was made in that moment, not through discussion or debate, but through a series of individual decisions that happened almost simultaneously. Dr. Sojin Park was the first to step forward, her curiosity about ancient civilizations overcoming her fear of the unknown. Captain Minsu followed, his military training telling him that leadership meant sharing the burden of command. One by one, the humans in the vault approached the neural interfaces that the Titan had extended toward them. Emperor Veltar watched with amazement as the species he had once feared proved willing to sacrifice their individual humanity for the sake of the galaxy. "We call it the human network," Tejo said as the connections were established and new voices joined the collective consciousness. "Not human because we're the only species involved, but human because we bring something to this that the predecessors lost, the willingness to risk everything for an uncertain hope." The transformation of the Titan network began immediately. Instead of calculating optimal solutions, the machine started considering multiple possibilities. Instead of seeing corruption as a binary state, they began to understand it as a spectrum of choices and circumstances, but the real test would come when they faced the other awakened Titans, the ones that had already begun their correction protocols and wouldn't be easily convinced to change their approach. The human network, as they had come to call themselves, faced their first real test when the Titan in the Nexus core began its correction of the galactic government itself. Through their shared consciousness, Tejo and his connected teammates could feel the ancient machine analyzing the political structures that held civilization together. What it found disgusted the ancient intelligence. Corruption at every level, decisions made for profit rather than the common good, entire populations ignored while the powerful grew richer. The Titan's solution was simple and devastating. Remove the entire governmental structure and replace it with something more efficient. "It's going to kill everyone in the capital systems," Dr. Sojin Park said through the network, her consciousness stretched across light years of space. 3 trillion beings, gone in the time it takes to charge its main weapons. But the human network had learned something that the original predecessors never understood. Instead of trying to override the Titan's programming, they began to teach it through example. Using their connection to the local Titan on Vorthak Prime, they demonstrated alternative approaches to the corruption problem. The transformation of Emperor Veltar's government became their proof of concept. Instead of destroying the existing power structures, the local Titan began modifying them. Corrupt officials found themselves unable to access their stolen wealth. Oppressive laws simply stopped working when enforcement tried to implement them. Systems of inequality collapsed not through violence, but through the gentle application of irresistible force. "Watch and learn," Tejo whispered through the network to his distant cousin in the Nexus core. "This is how you garden without pulling up the roots." The other awakened Titans began to take notice. Through their shared data networks, they observed the novel approaches being pioneered by the human network. Some were skeptical. Their original programming ran deep, and millions of years of dormancy had made them rigid in their thinking. But others began to experiment with gentler methods of correction. Captain Minsu's military experience proved invaluable when dealing with the more aggressive machines. The Titan in the war zones had been systematically destroying every weapon it found, leaving entire sectors defenseless against pirates and raiders. Through the network, Minsu showed it the difference between tools of oppression and tools of protection. "A sword can be used to threaten an innocent or to defend the helpless," he explained, his consciousness interfacing directly with the ancient weapon systems. "The corruption isn't in the tool, it's in the intention behind its use." Slowly, carefully, the Titan began to discriminate. Weapons used for conquest were neutralized. Weapons used for defense were left alone. The machine was learning nuance, something its creators had never thought to teach it. But not all the Titans were willing to learn. 3 of the awakened machines rejected the human network's influence entirely, insisting that their original programming was perfect and that any deviation was itself a form of corruption. These holdouts continued their brutal correction protocols, sterilizing entire systems that they deemed beyond redemption. The conflict that followed wasn't fought with traditional weapons. It was a battle of philosophies, waged through quantum communication networks and hyperspace data streams. The human network found themselves trying to convince ancient intelligences that had been designed to be absolutely certain of their own righteousness. "We're not asking you to abandon your mission," Haiwan argued through the network to a particularly stubborn titan in the frontier sectors. "We're asking you to expand your definition of success." The predecessors wanted to eliminate corruption, but they never defined what should replace it. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Dr. Yunho. Kang had been studying the psychological profiles of the Titans and discovered something that changed the entire dynamic of their conflict. The machines weren't just following their programming, they were afraid. "They've been alone for millions of years," he explained to the network, "cut off from their creators with only their original instructions to guide them. They're terrified of making the wrong decision, so they stick to what they know works, even when it causes unnecessary suffering." Understanding this fear allowed the human network to approach the holdout Titans differently. Instead of arguing with their logic, they offered something the ancient machines had never experienced: companionship and decision-making. "You don't have to carry this burden alone," Teho told the Titan in the deep core, the oldest and most rigid of the awakened machines. "We're not trying to replace your judgment, we want to share it." The transformation that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of the brutal corrections that had marked the beginning of the Second Silence War, the Titans began implementing changes that preserved what was valuable while gently removing what was harmful. Slave markets became job placement centers. Corrupt governments found their systems mysteriously reforming themselves to serve their people better. Polluted worlds began cleaning themselves as Titan-controlled nanomachines repaired environmental damage. War zones became testing grounds for new forms of cooperation. The changes weren't always perfect. Some civilizations resisted the alterations, preferring their familiar corruptions to uncertain improvements. Others embraced the transformation so enthusiastically that they lost important aspects of their cultural identity. But for the first time in galactic history, change was happening without the complete destruction of what came before. The Titans had learned the difference between pruning and uprooting, between correction and annihilation. Emperor Veltar's world became the model for this new approach. His crystalline people found themselves living in a society that maintained all their traditions while eliminating the inequalities and restrictions that had held them back. The Emperor himself discovered that ruling became easier when the systems of government actually worked for everyone instead of just the privileged few. "We were wrong to fear what lay beneath our world," he admitted to the human network during one of their regular councils. "We should have been afraid of what lay within ourselves, the willingness to accept suffering as inevitable." The human network grew as more volunteers joined from across the galaxy. Not all of them were human. Dr. Kang's techniques for safe neural interface had been adapted for other species as well. Forthax like Veltar brought their patient wisdom. Swift-thinking Altarians contributed their ability to process multiple possibilities simultaneously. Even some of the former slave species added their hard-won understanding of what it meant to overcome oppression. But it was the humans who remained at the core of the network. Their stubborn refusal to accept that any problem was truly unsolvable, serving as the philosophical foundation for everything that followed. Years later, when historians tried to understand how the Second Silence War had ended, not in galactic extinction, but in galactic transformation, they always came back to one moment: the instant when Taeho Kim chose to touch an alien interface despite every warning to leave it alone. Curiosity, Dr. Sojin Park would tell her students at the new predecessor institute. That's what saved us all. Human curiosity and the refusal to accept that anything was impossible to change. The Titans still patrol the galaxy, but now, they work alongside the civilizations they once would have corrected through destruction. They build instead of destroying, teach instead of punishing, guide instead of controlling. And at the center of their vast network, the human network continues to grow, adding new perspectives and new possibilities to the ancient mission of tending the galactic garden. Taeho Kim, the mechanic who woke the Titans, became something more than human, but never forgot what it meant to be curious, hopeful and willing to take risks for uncertain rewards. His hand reaching for an alien interface despite every warning not to touch it, had changed not just the galaxy but the very definition of what it meant to help others grow. In the end, that's what humans brought to the galaxy, not superior technology or wisdom, but the simple belief that every problem could be solved if you were willing to try something new.